The quiet suburban street of Willow Creek belied the simmering tensions that lay beneath its manicured lawns and cookie-cutter houses. Jason, a man who preferred the anonymity of routine, was as much a fixture of Willow Creek as the ancient oak tree at the end of the block. He was the guy who always helped Mrs. Henderson carry her groceries, who patiently taught little Timmy how to ride his bike, the reliable neighbor everyone could count on. But beneath the surface of this unassuming exterior lay a past etched in the harsh realities of war, a past he desperately tried to keep buried. His most cherished connection was with Emily, the girl next door. Not a child anymore, but a vibrant young woman, full of life and dreams. They had known each other since they were kids, their bond forged in shared secrets, whispered confidences, and the unwavering loyalty of childhood friendship. Emily was the sunshine in Jason's otherwise muted existence, a constant reminder of the good he was fighting to protect. She was everything to him. Even if neither of them had ever dared to voice it aloud, he always looked out for her. A silent guardian watching from the periphery, Emily, with her infectious laughter and boundless optimism, was a beacon of hope in Willow Creek. She volunteered at the local animal shelter, organized neighborhood cleanups, and always had a kind word for everyone she met. She was the embodiment of everything that was good and pure in the world, everything Jason felt compelled to protect. Their bond was evident in the small gestures. The shared morning coffee on the porch, the casual chats over the fence, the knowing glances that conveyed volumes of unspoken understanding. He knew her favorite flowers, sunflowers, always sunflowers. Her favorite ice cream, mint chocolate chip, and the way her brow furrowed when she was concentrating. She, in turn, knew his quiet habits, his preference for solitude, and the flicker of pain that sometimes shadowed his eyes. Jason had always been protective of Emily, an instinct honed by his military training and fueled by a deep-seated need to shield her from the darkness of the world. He chased away the neighborhood bullies when they were kids, fixed her bicycle when it broke, and offered a comforting presence whenever she felt down. His protective instincts, however, were about to be tested in ways he never could have imagined. The comfortable rhythm of their lives, the quiet sanctuary of Willow Creek, was about to be shattered by a brutal force that would drag them both into a terrifying nightmare. The stage was set, the players were in place, and the clock was ticking. Everything was about to change. The oppressive summer heat hung heavy in the air, blurring the edges of the afternoon. Jason was tinkering with his classic Mustang in the driveway, the rhythmic clang of wrench against metal a familiar sound in the neighborhood. Emily had promised to bring him a glass of iced tea, a small gesture that always brightened his day. He glanced up expectantly, wiping grease from his forehead, but instead of Emily, he saw a dark sedan slowly cruising down the street. The car, a matte black Charger with tinted windows, didn't belong in Willow Creek. It exuded an aura of menace, a silent predator stalking its prey. Jason's instincts, honed by years of combat, screamed danger. He straightened, his senses on high alert, his casual demeanor replaced by a focused intensity. He watched as the Charger slowed, then stopped directly in front of Emily's house. Before he could react, two figures emerged from the vehicle. They were large, heavily built men, their faces obscured by bandanas. Their movements were swift and purposeful, radiating a chilling efficiency. Jason's blood ran cold. He knew, with a sickening certainty, that this was no random encounter. They were here for Emily. He saw Emily emerge from her front door, a bright smile on her face and a glass of iced tea in her hand. The men moved with alarming speed, grabbing her before she could react. A muffled scream escaped her lips as they wrestled her towards the car. The glass shattered on the pavement, the shards glinting ominously in the sunlight. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. Jason's mind raced, processing the scene with a chilling clarity. He saw the terror in Emily's eyes, the desperate struggle to break free. He heard her muffled cries for help, each one a dagger twisting in his heart. He felt a surge of adrenaline, a primal rage building. Within him, he lunged forward, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He yelled, a guttural roar that echoed down the street, but it was too late. The men shoved Emily into the back of the Charger, slammed the doors shut, and sped away, leaving Jason standing helpless in the middle of the street. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant wail of a dog. Jason stood frozen, His heart pounding in his chest, the image of Emily's terrified face burned into his mind. The iced tea lay scattered on the pavement, a stark reminder of the brutal intrusion into their peaceful lives. The charger disappeared around the corner, taking Emily with it, plunging Jason into a vortex of despair and righteous fury. The line had been crossed. This wasn't just a threat. It was a declaration of war. And Jason knew, with unwavering certainty, that he would stop at nothing to bring her home. The initial shock began to recede, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. Jason knew he couldn't afford to succumb to despair. Emily's life depended on his actions, and every second counted. His first instinct was to call the police, but a chilling wave of doubt washed over him. He knew the stories, the rumors that swirled around the city about the notorious gang known as the Black Serpents. They were ruthless, untouchable, their tentacles reaching into every corner of the city's underbelly. The police, often understaffed and underfunded, were no match for their power and influence. Calling them might only put Emily in greater danger, alerting the gang and potentially sealing her fate. He had to consider other options. Options that involved him taking matters into his own hands. He walked into his house. The air thick with unspoken memories, he headed towards the basement, the concrete steps cold beneath his feet. The basement was his sanctuary, a place where he could escape. The ghosts of his past at IT was also where he kept the remnants of his former life, the tools and skills that he had tried so hard to bury. A single bare bulb illuminated the space, casting long, distorted shadows on the walls. He walked over to a locked metal cabinet, his fingers tracing the cold steel. He knew what was inside. The gear he had acquired during his time in the Special Forces, the weapons and equipment that had once been his constant companions. He hadn't touched them in years. But he knew they were still there, waiting to be called upon. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the lock. Opening that cabinet meant crossing a line. Returning to a life he had desperately tried to leave behind at IT meant embracing the darkness within him, the skills that he had used to kill and destroy. But Emily was worth it. Her safety was paramount. He couldn't stand idly by while she was in danger. With a deep breath, he retrieved a set of lock picks from a hidden compartment in the wall and expertly manipulated the tumblers. The cabinet clicked open, revealing its contents. A silenced pistol, a combat knife, a tactical vest, and various other pieces of equipment. He ran his hand over the familiar surfaces, the weight of the weapons bringing back a flood of memories, both good and bad. As he examined his gear, flashbacks assaulted him. He saw the faces of his fallen comrades, the horrors he had witnessed, the lives he had taken. He remembered the toll it had taken on his soul, the emptiness that had threatened to consume him. But he also remembered the sense of purpose, the camaraderie, and the unwavering commitment to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. He strapped on the tactical vest. The weight settling comfortably on his shoulders, he holstered the pistol and sheathed the knife, the familiar weight reassuring him he was no longer just Jason, the quiet neighbor. He was a soldier again, a warrior ready to fight for what he believed in. The decision was made. He wouldn't call the cops. He would rescue Emily himself. Now armed and equipped, Jason knew he couldn't charge in blindly. He needed information. Intel on the Black Serpents, their operations, and most importantly, their hideout. His mind raced, sifting through the fragmented memories of his past, searching for a connection, a lead, anything that could give him an edge. He remembered a name, a face from his military days. Marcus Razor Jones, a former informant with a knack for navigating the city's criminal underworld. Razor was a loose cannon, a morally ambiguous character, but he had a network of contacts that stretched far and wide. Jason hadn't seen him in years, but he knew how to find him. He grabbed his phone, his fingers flying across the screen as he searched for Razor's old number. IT was a long shot, but it was the only lead he had. After several rings, a gruff voice answered. "Yeah. Razor, it's Jason. Jason Keller. We served together in Kandahar." A moment of silence followed. "Keller. Damn. I thought you were dead. What do you want?" Jason cut to the chase. "I need information. The Black Serpents. They took someone close to me." Razor chuckled darkly. "Those snakes? They're bad news, Keller. You messing with them is like poking a hornet's nest with a stick." "I know the risks," Jason replied, his voice steely. I need to know where they operate, where they might be holding her. Razor hesitated. That kind of information comes at a price, Keller. You know that. Name it, Jason said, his voice unwavering. After some haggling, they struck a deal. Jason agreed to provide Razor with a favor in the future, a favor that he hoped he wouldn't live to regret. Razor gave him an address, a warehouse on the outskirts of the industrial district, rumored to be one of the Black Serpent's main hideouts. He also warned Jason to be careful, that the gang was heavily armed and wouldn't hesitate to kill. Armed with the address, Jason began to formulate a plan. He knew he couldn't just storm the warehouse, that he needed to be strategic, to use his skills and experience to his advantage. He studied a map of the industrial district, identifying potential entry points, escape routes, and areas of vulnerability as he planned. More flashbacks flooded his mind. He saw himself leading his squad through enemy territory, navigating treacherous terrain, and outsmarting his opponents. He remembered the importance of reconnaissance, the value of teamwork, and the need to be prepared for anything. He knew that rescuing Emily would be the most dangerous mission of his life. But he was willing to risk everything to bring her home safe. He had a plan, a destination, and the unwavering resolve to face whatever lay ahead. The hunt had begun. The warehouse district was a labyrinth of crumbling brick buildings, deserted alleys, and shadowy corners, a stark contrast to the manicured lawns of Willow Creek. The air hung thick with the smell of diesel and decay, a breeding ground for crime and desperation. Jason drove his Mustang slowly, carefully observing his surroundings, his senses on high alert. He parked a block away from the warehouse, choosing a location that offered a clear view of the entrance and a quick escape route if needed. He killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the tension. He took a pair of binoculars from the glove compartment and scanned the area, searching for any signs of activity. The warehouse itself was a hulking, windowless structure, its walls covered in graffiti and grime. The only entrance was a large metal loading door, which was currently closed. Jason spotted a security camera mounted above the door, its unblinking eye watching the street. He also noticed two figures patrolling the perimeter, their faces hidden beneath hooded sweatshirts. They carried what appeared to be automatic weapons. Jason knew he couldn't approach the warehouse directly. He needed to find another way in. A back door, a hidden entrance, anything that could give him the element of surprise. He consulted the map he had printed out. Studying the surrounding buildings and alleyways, he identified a potential access point. An abandoned factory located adjacent to the warehouse, connected by a narrow alleyway. He started the Mustang and drove slowly towards the abandoned factory. His headlights cutting through the darkness, he parked in the shadows and exited the vehicle. His movements fluid and silent. He checked his gear, ensuring that his pistol was readily accessible and his knife was securely sheathed. He moved cautiously through the alleyway, his footsteps muffled by the debris-strewn ground. The air was thick with the stench of garbage and decay. He reached the back of the factory and examined the wall, searching for a way in. He found a broken window, its glass shattered and jagged. He carefully cleared away the remaining shards, creating an opening large enough to crawl through. He hesitated for a moment, taking a deep breath and steeling his nerves. He knew that once he entered the factory, there was no turning back. He was stepping into the unknown, into the heart of the Black Serpent's territory. But Emily was counting on him. He climbed through the broken window, landing silently on the dusty floor inside the factory. The interior was dark and cavernous, filled with the remnants of a bygone era. Rusted machinery, broken furniture, and piles of discarded debris. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay. He activated his night vision goggles, the darkness transforming into a surreal green landscape. He moved slowly and deliberately, his senses straining to detect any sign of movement or sound. He knew that the Black Serpents could be anywhere, waiting to ambush him. The suspense was palpable, each step a gamble, each breath a risk. He was alone, deep in enemy territory, but he was determined to find Emily, no matter the cost. Inside the abandoned factory, Jason moved like a ghost, his night vision goggles painting the decaying interior in eerie shades of green. He navigated through the maze of rusted machinery and crumbling walls, his senses on high alert, searching for a way to access the warehouse next door. He consulted the blueprints he had acquired from Razor, studying the layout of both buildings. He discovered a connecting corridor, a narrow passageway that had once been used to transport materials between the factory and the warehouse. The corridor was sealed off by a heavy steel door, reinforced with multiple locks and bolts. Jason examined the door closely, assessing its defenses. He knew he couldn't simply force it open without alerting the gang. He needed a more subtle approach. He reached into his backpack and retrieved a set of specialized tools, lock picks, and a small thermal drill. He worked quickly and efficiently, his fingers expertly manipulating the tumblers of the locks. The thermal drill whirred quietly, cutting through the steel bolts with precision. After several minutes of intense concentration, the door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit corridor beyond. He peered cautiously into the corridor, his pistol raised and ready. The air was thick with the smell of stale cigarette smoke and something else, something acrid and unsettling. He could hear muffled voices and the faint sound of music coming from the warehouse. He took a deep breath and stepped into the corridor, his senses on full alert. The corridor led to a small storage room inside the warehouse. Jason carefully opened the door and peered inside. The room was empty, save for a few stacks of crates and a flickering fluorescent light. He could hear voices nearby, but he couldn't pinpoint their exact location. Knew he was close to the heart of the operation. He decided to send a message, a clear signal that he was coming for Emily. He retrieved a small incendiary device from his backpack, a compact grenade designed to create a localized fire. He set the timer and tossed the device into a pile of oily rags in the corner of the storage room. He quickly retreated back into the corridor, closing the door behind him. A few seconds later, a muffled explosion rocked the warehouse, followed by the crackling sound of flames. He could hear shouts and screams as the gang members scrambled to extinguish the fire. Jason seized the opportunity to create further chaos. He located the warehouse's main electrical panel and used his combat knife to sever the power lines. The warehouse plunged into darkness, plunging the gang into further disarray. He melted back into the shadows, listening to the sounds of confusion and panic emanating from the warehouse. He knew that his actions had bought him some time, creating a window of opportunity to find Emily. The message was sent, loud and clear. He was here, and he wasn't backing down. Now, it was time to find her. Back on Willow Creek, news of Emily's kidnapping had spread like wildfire. Initially, a blanket of fear and disbelief settled over the neighborhood. Doors were locked, curtains were drawn, and the usual sounds of children playing and neighbors chatting were replaced by an eerie silence. The Black Serpents were a name whispered in hushed tones, a dark legend that had suddenly become a terrifying reality. But beneath the surface of fear, something else was brewing. Anger. Emily was loved by everyone in Willow Creek. Her kindness, her generosity, and her unwavering spirit had touched the lives of countless people. The thought of her being held captive by those monsters ignited a slow-burning rage in the hearts of her neighbors. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman Jason often helped with her groceries, was the first to break the silence. She had witnessed the kidnapping from her window, and the image of Emily's terrified face haunted her. She couldn't stand idly by while Emily was in danger. She started making phone calls, reaching out to her neighbors, urging them to do something, anything, to help. One of the first to respond was Mr. Johnson, a retired engineer with a passion for electronics. He had a workshop in his garage filled with gadgets and tools, and a knack for building and repairing anything. He was also fiercely protective of his community. He offered to help Jason by providing surveillance equipment, jamming devices, and anything else that might be useful. Then there was Maria Rodriguez, a single mother who worked as a nurse at the local hospital. She was tough, resourceful, and fiercely loyal to her friends and neighbors. She had a medical kit stocked with supplies and a knowledge of first aid that could prove invaluable. She volunteered to provide medical support and assistance to anyone who might get injured. Even Old Man Fitzwilliam, the grumpy recluse who lived at the end of the street, offered his help. He was a former marksman with a collection of hunting rifles and a sharp aim. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. He offered to provide cover and support from a distance, using his skills to protect his neighbors. As the day wore on, more and more neighbors came forward, offering their skills, their resources, and their unwavering support. A sense of community, long dormant in the quiet suburban street, began to awaken. They were no longer just neighbors. They were a team, united by a common goal: to bring Emily home safe. The tide was turning on Willow Creek. Fear was giving way to resolve, silence was giving way to action, and the quiet suburban street was about to transform into a battleground. The Black Serpents had made a mistake when they took Emily. They had underestimated the power of community, the strength of the human spirit, and the fury of a neighborhood united against evil. Back at Jason's house, the atmosphere was charged with a mixture of determination and apprehension. The core group of neighbors, Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Johnson, Maria Rodriguez, and Old Man Fitzwilliam, had gathered in his living room, poring over a detailed map of the warehouse and its surroundings. Jason, initially reluctant to involve anyone else, realized that he couldn't do this alone. He needed their help, their skills, and their unwavering support. He spread out the blueprints Razor had provided, highlighting the key areas: the main entrance, the connecting corridor from the abandoned factory, the security camera locations, and the estimated number of gang members inside. He explained his plan, outlining the risks and the potential dangers. "This is not going to be easy," Jason said, his voice grave. "These guys are professionals. They're armed, they're dangerous, and they won't hesitate to kill. If you're not sure you can handle this, now's the time to back out." No one moved. They all looked at Jason, their faces etched with determination. Mrs. Henderson, despite her age, stood tall and resolute. "Emily is one of us. Jason. We're not going to abandon her." Mr. Johnson chimed in. "I've been working on a few gadgets that might come in handy. I've got a jamming device that can disable their security cameras, and a few remote-controlled drones that can provide us with reconnaissance." Maria Rodriguez added, "I've got a fully stocked medical kit, and I know how to use it. I can provide first aid to anyone who gets injured." Old Man Fitzwilliam simply nodded, his eyes glinting with a steely resolve. "I'll provide cover. I've got a few rifles that can reach those perimeter guards." Jason was moved by their courage and their willingness to risk their lives for Emily. He knew that he couldn't ask them to do this, but he also knew that he couldn't stop them. He had to accept their help, and he had to do everything in his power to keep them safe. He spent the next few hours refining his plan, incorporating their skills and resources. Mr. Johnson set up his jamming device, disabling the security cameras and creating a blind spot for the gang. He also launched his drones, providing Jason with a live feed of the warehouse interior. Maria Rodriguez organized her medical kit, preparing for any potential injuries. Old Man Fitzwilliam set up his sniper position, overlooking the warehouse and its perimeter. Jason emphasized the importance of teamwork, communication, and coordination. He assigned each person a specific role, ensuring that everyone knew what to do and when to do it. He also stressed the need for caution, reminding them that their lives were at stake. As they finalized their plan, a sense of nervous anticipation filled the room. They knew that they were about to embark on a dangerous mission, but they were also filled with a sense of purpose and determination. They were a team, a community, united by a common goal: to bring Emily home safe. The assault was about to begin. The scene shifted to a flurry of activity, a montage of preparations echoing the growing resolve within the small band of neighbors. Each person, transformed by a shared purpose, moved with a focused intensity, preparing for the battle ahead. Mr. Johnson, hunched over his workbench, meticulously calibrated his jamming device, ensuring that it would effectively neutralize the warehouse's security systems. He double-checked the batteries on his remote-controlled drones, adjusting their cameras and sensors for optimal performance in the dimly lit environment. He wasn't a soldier, but he was an engineer, and he would use his skills to give them an edge. Maria Rodriguez, in her small kitchen, meticulously organized her medical kit, laying out bandages, antiseptic wipes, and pain relievers. She practiced applying a tourniquet on her own arm, her movements precise and efficient. She wasn't a fighter, but she was a nurse, and she would be ready to treat any injuries that might occur. Old Man Fitzwilliam, in his cluttered living room, cleaned and oiled his hunting rifles, his weathered hands moving with practiced ease. He sighted down the barrels, his keen eyes scanning the distance. He wasn't a hero, but he was a marksman, and he would provide cover for his neighbors. Even Mrs. Henderson, despite her age and frailty, found a way to contribute. She prepared a pot of strong coffee, providing a much-needed boost of energy and warmth to the group. She also gathered flashlights, batteries, and blankets, anticipating the long and difficult night ahead. She wasn't a warrior, but she was a mother figure to the neighborhood, and she would provide comfort and support. Jason, watching his neighbors prepare, felt a surge of gratitude and respect. He had initially doubted their ability to handle the situation, but he was now witnessing their strength, their courage, and their unwavering commitment. He realized that they were more than just neighbors. They were a family, bound together by a shared sense of community. He strapped on his tactical vest, holstering his pistol and sheathing his knife. He checked his ammunition, ensuring that he had enough firepower to face the gang. He wasn't just a quiet neighbor anymore. He was a soldier again, ready to lead his community into battle as they gathered in Jason's living room. Ready to depart. A sense of unity and purpose filled the air. They were a motley crew, a mix of ages, backgrounds, and skills, but they were united by a common goal: to rescue Emily and to protect their community. They armed themselves with whatever weapons they could find: baseball bats, crowbars, kitchen knives, and even a few garden tools. They weren't soldiers, but they were determined to fight for what they believed in. The feeling of community was palpable, a tangible force that gave them strength and courage. They were ready to face the darkness, together. The fury of Willow Creek was about to be unleashed. Under the cover of darkness, the assault began. Jason, leading the charge, moved silently through the abandoned factory, followed closely by Mr. Johnson, who carried his jamming device and a small backpack filled with makeshift explosives. Maria Rodriguez, her medical kit slung over her shoulder, brought up the rear, ready to provide immediate assistance if needed. Old Man Fitzwilliam remained at his sniper position, overlooking the warehouse and providing overwatch. Jason reached the connecting corridor and cautiously opened the door, peering into the dimly lit storage room. The fire he had set earlier had been extinguished, but the air was still thick with smoke. And the smell of burnt rags. He could hear the muffled voices of the gang members, still scrambling to restore order. He signaled to Mr. Johnson to activate the jamming device, which effectively neutralized the warehouse's security cameras, blinding the gang and creating a window of opportunity. Jason then tossed a smoke grenade into the storage room, filling the space with thick, disorienting smoke that he charged into the room. His pistol raised and ready, followed closely by Mr. Johnson and Maria Rodriguez. The gang members, caught off guard by the sudden attack, were disoriented and confused. Jason moved with lethal precision, taking down the closest gang members with quick, decisive shots. Mr. Johnson, despite his lack of combat experience, proved to be surprisingly effective. He used his makeshift explosives to create diversions, disorienting the gang members and creating chaos. Maria Rodriguez, meanwhile, tended to the wounded, providing first aid to both the neighbors and the gang members. Old Man Fitzwilliam, from his sniper position, provided covering fire, taking down any gang members who posed a serious threat. His accurate shots kept the gang pinned down, allowing Jason and his neighbors to advance. The assault was a mix of stealth, ingenuity, and brute force. Jason used his military training to navigate the warehouse and take down the gang members, while Mr. Johnson used his technical skills to disrupt their operations. Maria Rodriguez used her medical expertise to treat the wounded, and Old Man Fitzwilliam used his marksmanship to provide cover. The gang members, despite their numbers and their firepower, were no match for the coordinated assault. They were caught off guard, disorganized, and unprepared for the fury of Willow Creek. They fought back fiercely, but they were slowly being overwhelmed as the assault progressed. The feeling of community grew stronger. The neighbors were fighting together, supporting each other, and protecting each other. They were a team, a family, united by a common goal: to rescue Emily and to bring justice to their community. The tide was turning. The fury of Willow Creek was about to break. The air crackled with tension as Jason faced the gang leader, a man known only as Viper. Viper was a gaunt figure, his eyes burning with a cold, reptilian intensity that sent a chill down Jason's spine. He held a serrated knife, its blade glinting menacingly in the dim light. "You shouldn't have come here," Viper hissed, his voice raspy and devoid of emotion. "This is our territory. You and your little friends are going to regret this." Jason didn't respond, he simply stared at Viper. His eyes filled with a cold, unwavering resolve. He knew that this was it, the final showdown. Everything depended on this moment. Viper lunged, his knife flashing towards Jason's throat. Jason reacted instantly, dodging the attack and delivering a swift kick to Viper's chest, sending him stumbling backwards. Viper recovered quickly, his eyes burning with rage. He charged again, his knife slicing through the air. The two men engaged in a brutal dance of death, their movements a blur of speed and violence. Jason used his military training to his advantage, dodging, blocking, and countering Viper's attacks. He knew that he couldn't afford to make a mistake. One wrong move could cost him his life, and Emily's. Viper, despite his ferocity, was no match for Jason's skill and experience. Jason managed to disarm him, knocking the knife from his grasp. Viper, enraged, resorted to hand-to-hand combat, throwing punches and kicks with reckless abandon. Jason absorbed the blows, his body aching from the impact. He knew that he had to end this quickly. He saw an opening and seized it, delivering a powerful uppercut that sent Viper crashing to the ground. Viper lay motionless, his eyes glazed over. Jason stood over him, his chest heaving, his body covered in sweat and bruises. He had won, but the battle wasn't over yet. He still had to find Emily. As Jason turned to search for Emily, he heard a faint cry for help coming from a nearby room. He rushed towards the sound, his heart pounding in his chest. He kicked down the door and found Emily tied to a chair, her face bruised and battered. Relief washed over him as he saw that she was alive. He quickly untied her, his hands trembling with emotion. "Emily, are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Emily nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "Jason, you came for me?" she whispered. "I'll always come for you," Jason replied, his voice choked with emotion. He embraced her tightly, holding her close. They were safe, for now, but they still had to escape the warehouse. Their reunion was short-lived as Jason helped Emily to her feet. A voice boomed from the doorway. Well. Look what we have here." Standing in the doorway were two heavily armed gang members, their faces grim and determined. They had clearly been expecting Jason and Emily, and they were ready for a fight. One of them leveled his weapon, a sawed-off shotgun, directly at Emily. "Take another step, and she's dead." The gang member snarled. Jason froze, his mind racing. He knew that he couldn't risk Emily's life. He had to find a way to defuse the situation without resorting to violence. But he also knew that the gang members wouldn't hesitate to kill them both if given the chance. "Let her go," Jason said, his voice calm but firm. "This doesn't have to end like this." The gang member laughed, a harsh, mirthless sound. "You think we're just gonna let you walk out of here? You're crazy. You messed with the wrong people." A tense standoff ensued, the air thick with anticipation. Jason and the gang members stared each other down, each waiting for the other to make the first move. Emily, her eyes filled with fear, clung tightly to Jason's arm. Suddenly, a voice crackled over Jason's earpiece. "Jason, we've got you covered. Just give us the signal." It was Mr. Johnson, his voice calm and reassuring. Jason hesitated for a moment, weighing his options. He knew that involving his neighbors could put them in danger. But he also knew that he couldn't take on the gang members alone. He needed their help. "Okay, Johnson," Jason replied, his voice barely a whisper. "Give me a diversion." A moment later, a series of explosions rocked the warehouse, disorienting the gang members and creating a window of opportunity. Mr. Johnson had rigged several makeshift explosives to detonate simultaneously, creating a chaotic distraction. Jason seized the opportunity to act. He shoved Emily behind him, shielding her from harm, and charged towards the gang members, his pistol blazing. He fired with deadly accuracy, taking down one of the gang members with a single shot. The other gang member, enraged by the death of his comrade, opened fire with his shotgun. Jason ducked behind a stack of crates, dodging the deadly spray of pellets. He knew that he couldn't stay there for long. He had to find a way to disarm the gang member and escape the warehouse. As the gang member reloaded his shotgun, Old Man Fitzwilliam, from his sniper position, took aim and fired. The bullet struck the gang member in the shoulder, causing him to drop his weapon. Jason seized the opportunity to rush forward, disarming the injured gang member and taking him down with a swift kick to the head. With the gang members neutralized, Jason turned to Emily, his heart filled with relief. "We have to go," he said, grabbing her hand. "Now!" As Jason and Emily made their way towards the exit, they were ambushed by another group of gang members, forcing them to fight their way through the warehouse once more. The battle was fierce and chaotic, but Jason and Emily, with the help of their neighbors, managed to hold their own. Just as they were about to reach the exit, a figure emerged from the shadows, blocking their path. It was Viper, the gang leader. His face contorted with rage, he was battered and bruised, but he was still dangerous. "You're not going anywhere," Viper snarled, his voice filled with venom. "I'm going to make you pay for what you've done." Jason pushed Emily behind him, shielding her from Viper's wrath. "This ends here," Jason said, his voice cold and unwavering. Viper lunged at Jason, his hands outstretched, his eyes filled with murderous intent. Jason dodged the attack and retaliated with a series of swift and brutal blows. The two men engaged in a final, desperate showdown, their bodies crashing against crates and machinery. The contrast between Jason and Viper was stark. Jason was driven by a protective rage, a fierce desire to protect Emily and his community. Viper, on the other hand, was driven by a cold, calculating cruelty, a desire for power and control. Jason fought with a ferocity he didn't know he possessed, channeling all of his anger and frustration into each blow. He was fighting not just for Emily, but for everyone who had been victimized by the Black Serpents. Viper, despite his ruthlessness, was no match for Jason's determination. Jason managed to gain the upper hand, disarming Viper and pinning him to the ground. He stared down at Viper, his eyes filled with righteous fury. "Why did you do this?" Jason asked, his voice trembling with emotion. "Why did you kidnap Emily?" Viper laughed, a hollow, mocking sound. "Because I could," he replied, his eyes filled with defiance. "Because I wanted to show you that no one is safe, that everyone is vulnerable." Jason's rage reached its breaking point. He raised his fist and delivered a final, devastating blow to Viper's face, knocking him unconscious. He stood over Viper's lifeless body, his chest heaving, his body trembling with exhaustion. The warehouse fell silent. The battle was over. The Black Serpents had been defeated, and Emily was safe. Jason helped Emily to her feet and led her out of the warehouse, into the cool night air. They were greeted by their neighbors, who cheered and applauded their victory. The fury of Willow Creek had been unleashed, and it had brought justice to their community. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of activity. The police, alerted by anonymous calls, arrived at the warehouse, sirens wailing and lights flashing. They secured the scene, arresting the surviving gang members and tending to the wounded. Jason and his neighbors, exhausted but relieved, watched as the police took control as the reality of what they had done began to sink in. A sense of unease settled over the group. They had taken the law into their own hands, resorting to violence to protect their community. They had defeated the Black Serpents, but they had also crossed a line, blurring the boundaries between right and wrong. The moral complexities of their actions weighed heavily on their minds. Had they done the right thing? Had they gone too far? Would they face consequences for their actions? Emily, still shaken by her ordeal, struggled to reconcile the violence she had witnessed with the kindness and compassion that she had always known. She was grateful to Jason and her neighbors for rescuing her, but she was also troubled by the brutality of their methods. Jason, haunted by his past, wrestled with his own demons. He had embraced the darkness within him, returning to a life of violence that he had tried so hard to leave behind. He wondered if he had done the right thing, or if he had simply unleashed his inner monster. The community of Willow Creek came together to support each other and rebuild. They organized counseling sessions for those who had been traumatized by the events, and they established a neighborhood watch program to prevent future incidents. Maria Rodriguez, with her medical expertise, provided ongoing care to those who had been injured during the assault. She also organized a series of workshops on self-defense, empowering the residents to protect themselves and their community. Mr. Johnson, using his technical skills, developed a sophisticated security system for the neighborhood. providing an early warning system in case of future threats. He also created a community communication network, allowing the residents to stay informed and connected. Old Man Fitzwilliam, despite his gruff exterior, became a mentor to the younger residents, teaching them about self-reliance and resilience. He also shared his knowledge of marksmanship, teaching them how to defend themselves if necessary. The Black Serpents, though significantly weakened, were not completely defeated. They still posed a threat to the community and the residents of Willow Creek knew that they had to remain vigilant. Jason, despite his reservations, accepted his role as the protector of Willow Creek. He knew that he couldn't turn his back on his community, and he was willing to do whatever it took to keep them safe. The healing process was long and difficult, but the community of Willow Creek was determined to overcome their trauma and to build a better future. Weeks turned into months, and the scars of the kidnapping began to fade, replaced by a renewed sense of community and resilience in Willow Creek. Emily, after undergoing therapy and receiving unwavering support from her friends and neighbors, slowly began to heal. The trauma of her ordeal had changed her, but it had also made her stronger, more determined to live her life to the fullest. Her bond with Jason deepened, forged in the crucible of shared danger and unwavering loyalty. They had always been close, but now their connection was unbreakable. A silent understanding that transcended words. They knew that they could always count on each other, no matter what challenges they might face. One evening, as the sun began to set, Jason and Emily sat on her porch, sipping iced tea and watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. The air was filled with a sense of peace and tranquility, a stark contrast to the chaos and violence that had engulfed their lives just a few months earlier. "Thank you, Jason," Emily said, her voice soft and sincere. "For everything. For saving my life." Jason smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "You don't have to thank me," he replied. "I would do anything for you, Emily. You know that." They sat in silence for a moment, enjoying the peace and quiet of the evening. The world felt right again, as if the balance had been restored. But they both knew that the world was still a dangerous place, and that the Black Serpents were still out there, lurking in the shadows. As Jason prepared to leave, Emily stopped him, placing her hand on his arm. "Jason," she said, her voice serious, "I know that you're not just an ordinary guy. That I saw what you did in that warehouse. You're a soldier, a warrior." Jason hesitated, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and regret. He had tried so hard to bury his past, to escape the darkness that haunted him. But Emily had seen through his facade, recognizing the truth that he had tried to hide. "It's complicated," Jason replied, his voice barely a whisper. "I know," Emily said, squeezing his arm gently. "But I also know that you're a good man, Jason, and that you're always going to protect me and our community." Jason smiled, his heart filled with gratitude and love. He knew that Emily understood him, accepted him, and believed in him. And that was all that mattered. As he walked away, Emily watched him, her eyes filled with admiration and affection. She knew that Jason was no longer just an ordinary guy. He was a hero, a protector, and the love of her life. The threat of the Black Serpent still lingered, but the community of Willow Creek was ready. They had faced the darkness, and they had emerged stronger, more united, and more determined than ever. And with Jason leading the way, they knew that they could overcome any challenge that came their way. The fury of Willow Creek had been unleashed, and it would continue to burn brightly, protecting their community and bringing justice to those who threatened their peace. The end.